Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's review, we are taking a look at the butter from Flash Discs. Let's begin by taking a look at the profile and the feel. Starting with the profile, you will notice it has a very rounded nose. Not a blunt nose, just very rounded from the bottom under wing all the way then through the shoulder up to the middle of the flight plate. And with the flight plate, it does have a slight amount of dome to it. So if you like deep putters that have a little bit of domes, especially in premium plastic, this is going to feel extremely comfortable. Also, the plastic itself, this steady plastic, if you have not felt Clash Steady plastic, this is so smooth, very flexible and gummy, one of the best feeling plastics out there, so easy to manipulate. But even with me forcing the flight plate down, as you can see, I still can't even pinch my fingers, making this just a very, very deep putter. For the flight numbers, the butter speed 2, glide 3, turn 0, and a fade of 1, which by the numbers would make this a very neutral flying putter. But as you're going to see with the flight, it had a surprising amount of late stability that I was not expecting. When thrown on a hyzer, the butter does just that. It holds the hyzer line, barely gets any flip up whatsoever, and then has a really nice substantial finish at the very end. And when you do throw it flat, it holds torque extremely well, so it rides out very straight, and then about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the flight is when it kind of slows down, checks up, and has a predictable finish. Even once you start getting these on slight and hyzer lines, it's not like it's flipping over. It's just kind of holding the line that you release it, holding that angle before leveling itself out at the end and then having a little bit of a finish. And even once you start exaggerating that anhyzer angle, it still towards the end of the flight will level itself out and will even try to fight out. It's a very kind of point and shoot, but straight to slight hyzer. So it's always a disc that you want to aim, whether you're a righty or lefty, a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right of the basket, just so that way you can really depend on that predictable fade that once you throw it out straight on your line, it'll fade back to the target. Even when you do throw it on an anhyzer angle, again, it's just going to kind of hold that angle before it'll level itself out and have kind of a forward level finish. So that way it almost becomes extremely straight once you start throwing it on those slight anhyzer angles. And with the butter being such a deep putter, it has tremendous amount of glide. So that means if you have a low ceiling, you're not going to be able to get too much out of the butter. There are going to be better options. But if you have a lot of airspace, you can really throw the butter up in the air and just let it float. It's a slow moving, floaty, neutral flying putter that, because of its floatiness, once it hits the ground, it is going to keep you next to the basket, as it's really not going to get any big skips. A little earlier, I mentioned that the butter has a decent amount of torque resistance, which for backhand means you're not going to get a panning or meandering drift in the middle of the flight. Well, that also means when you throw it for forehand, it handles the extra torque on forehand pretty well. However, I would still recommend keeping it on hyzer and not throwing it at full power, just those kind of more touch approach shots, not something that you're going to really put everything into. Let's transition over to the course and see how I would use the butter. This you have just kind of wide open, anything you want. I'm just going to go for the very predictable hyzer because the butter holds it very well. It does not get almost any flip up at all. It just holds that nice arcing hyzer line, so that way you just know exactly where it's going to come down. For this shot, you do have that danger off onto the left and the right, so this is kind of more of a straight shot. Again, it's a very floaty putter, so you have to get a lot of height on it to get that distance, but then just watch it kind of slowly float about 3/4 of the way through the flight before then, again, that late stability kicks in, brings it back to the basket. For this, you have that tree on the left-hand side, meaning you have to go for anhyzer. And the butter, as I mentioned, it holds that anhyzer turn most of the way. It will still level itself out, but it does hold it a good portion of the way. This is an example that even with an extreme anhyzer, you're not quite going to get it there. It's good for those subtle anhyzers, but not these big sky anhyzers. As yes, it gets up and around, but then it levels itself out, and as you can see there, it's trying to actually hyzer itself back. It doesn't hold it all the way to the ground. But what are the other plastics that the butter comes in? Well, we've seen it in that steady plastic. It also comes in hardy and softy, which are the two baseline plastics. Hardy is going to be a little stiffer, softy is going to be, well, a lot softer. I had it in the hardy plastic, and I will say it is just a smidge more understable than the steady. When thrown on just a slight anhyzer, it gets a little bit of a panning turn before just checking up at the very end of the flight, whereas the steady doesn't have that gentle pan or drift, it just holds a very straight line. So we've seen the butter as a thrower, but how about as a putting putter? Because that's what a lot of people are going to be using the butter for. Now, I'm a push putter, so when I putt at longer distances, I get progressively more and more dump towards the end of the putt. However, with the butter, it doesn't matter if I'm in the circle, circle's edge, or just outside the circle. It did not have any kind of dump whatsoever. It just held that angle and held the line that I put it on all the way to the basket. This is just a true straight putting putter. For the lefty lines, I wanted to pit the butter against other putters on the market that I think resemble its flight pretty well, which is that torque resistant straight flight with just a little bit of a hyzer finish. So ignoring their flight numbers, I pitted it against the Luna from Discraft and the Maiden from Westside Discs. And to be honest, it held a very similar line to the Luna. I think maybe the Luna just had a little bit harder of a finish than the butter did, and the Maiden I think held straighter longer before having a very similar finish. These are all three, I think, are pretty comparable to each other. Not quite exactly. Again, I think the Luna maybe checks up just a hair sooner, maybe a little bit stronger of a finish, versus the Maiden is kind of a little bit straighter, still a good finish, but again, a little bit straighter, a little bit further, and then the butter just kind of meets right in the middle. So good amount of straightness and a good amount of hyzer. So all three very similar, but very small differences. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Trying to make that push to 10,000 subscribers, so every single one helps. Thank you so very much. Also, be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com if you want to get your own butter. Be sure to use that promo code Lefty at checkout to save 10%. And be sure to comment down below with what discs you want me to review in 2025 as I am putting that list together. Well, thank you all again so much, and until the next one, keep banging chains.